It's a famous saying by Swami Vivekananda that arise, awake and stop not till the goal is reached. First of all, on behalf of BYJU'S IAS, I would congratulate you and for writing this mains exam. And also, we pray and wish that you come out with flying colors. Personality test is not an interview, as it is commonly believed. It is not the test of your knowledge, because your knowledge has already been tested during prelims exam and your mains examination. It is about something else, something extra related to your personality. It is related to your DAF, the information that you submit. It is related to your hobbies. It is related to your background, educational background, social background, your state, your previous job or jobs, if any. It is related to your overall personality. So today we have Ambassador Amit Das Gupta, an IFS officer, who apart from serving in different parts of this world as Indian representative in different capacities, as ambassador to Philippines and Australia, and he is country director presently with New South Wales University, Sydney. And also we are honored to have Prabhakar Mani Tripathi sir, who is a renowned psychologist and has an experience of more than 10 to 12 years in dealing with the issues related to interview and personality test for UPSC Civil Services aspirant. So today, to have a holistic perspective and viewpoint on how to take on this personality test and maximize your marks. So first let's start with Ambassador Amit Das Gupta sir. Thank you sir. You can address the students.
Good afternoon everybody. And at some point of time this interactive session would be posted on the net, and so good morning, good afternoon and good evening to all those who would be listening to it at different points of time during the day. I'll just make a couple of, or rather one brief comment, and then go on to discussing during the interactive session as to why we have a title which many might consider to be so strange for today's interactive session. And the point I'd like you to think about, for those of you who have a piece of paper, you might want to scribble it down. Question 1. Think about one person who made an enormous impact in your life. Can be anyone actually. Think about one person. Write that person's name down. Second, what exactly about that person impressed you the most? What did you learn from that person? Third, if you were part of the interview board and if a person came looking for a job, what are the qualities you would look for in that person? And finally, do you have those qualities? So I'd like you to think about these 4 questions, even when you go home, and scribble them down somewhere. And keep it as a template for you to visit and to revisit. Because anyone who's done some basic management would recognize that there are actually 4 things we do. The most important thing we do in life is to take a decision. But the 4 things we do after that is 1, we decide on a goal, an objective, a direction. Now, for example, you may decide that your goal is to join the civil services, and that within the civil services, your goal is to join the Indian Police Service. That may be a goal. So you decide on the goal. The second is you strategize. In other words, you ask yourself, how do I achieve this goal? The third thing you do is to execute. In other words, you look at your strategy and then you start working towards it. And the fourth thing you do is to sit back, look back and say, is it working? Do I need to tweak it a bit here? Do I need to do a little adjustment, a little course correction? Do I need to add something to what I was planning to do? So that's basically the four things you do. But once this session is over and once you go home, over the next day or two, think about the four questions that I started off with. And perhaps this interactive session of today might make more sense. So I now leave it to you, sir, to take it forward.
The first point that I would like to ask you, that today's title you suggested, should I polish my shoes? Initially I could not understand the meaning. So would you please elaborate, sir?
I don't have any brothers and sisters. I grew up in Calcutta, Kolkata now. My parents weren't very rich people, they were middle class, not even upper middle class. I know that my parents sacrificed a lot for me to join and do whatever I'm doing today. And both my mother and my father sacrificed. But as I was growing up, as a young boy, I would find that my father every morning, before he went to work, this was a ritual that he had. He would iron his shirt, he would iron his trousers, and he would polish his shoes. He did this every day. And then as I grew older, I asked my father if I could polish his shoes for him. And he said, yes, you can polish my shoes, but you can also polish your own shoes. And he says, you know, if you look after your shoes, this pair of shoes I'm wearing, by the way, if I were to tell you this, you might laugh. It's 22 years old.
Goodness.
And it lasts because I look after it. Every week on Sunday morning, I take out the 3 pairs of shoes I have, leather shoes, and I polish them. I've done this without fail, all through. Now, polishing shoes has a different element to it. It's one of humility. Should I polish my shoes? And as you grow older and you join the civil service or you join whatever, you join a big company, multinational, you think it to be below your dignity to polish your shoes. I mean, I knew a colleague in the Foreign Service once who would carry his tiffin box and his briefcase. The next morning, he had been promoted to the role of a joint secretary. And he got out of the car. It was a government car. So till you were joint secretary, you didn't get a car. He got out of the car, and then his peon carried his tiffin box and his briefcase, because it was beneath his dignity to do so. And many years ago, as a first secretary, I was in Brussels in an elevator, going for a meeting, and I was looking at a piece of paper and reading it. 3 other people, some people, walked into the lift. And one of them said in a very British accent, "You must be having a very important meeting today, young man." So I said, yeah. I looked up. The person who spoke to me was Prime Minister John Major of the United Kingdom. Standing beside him was Mitterrand, the French president. And beside him was Jacques Delors, the president of the European Commission. They were all carrying their briefcases. There was no security. One of the big things you learn in life is humility. You know, when I become an ambassador, I won't speak to you because you're not my level. You know, I will speak only to another ambassador. When you start thinking along those lines, then you will never polish your shoes. And it brings me to something I had shared once with YP Saab, which is when I told my father, I used to study in Delhi. I was at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. My parents were still in Kolkata, and results had come out, and I took the train. I couldn't afford an air ticket. I took the train, and Kalka Express, third class, went to Kolkata, went to meet my parents, touched their feet, and we went to Kalibari. And because my parents knew that I had entry into the Foreign Service. And my father told me, there's something you should never try and forget. The civil service is broken up into two words: civil and service. Never be uncivil to someone. And if you're civil, it is only born out of humility. And service means that you're constantly a servant. You are there to service the requirements of the common man or any person who comes to you for help. And I think the reason why I chose a title like "Should I Polish My Shoes" is to be able to express that one of the biggest things that is lacking sometimes in many of us is this sense of humility. We feel there's a loss of self-esteem unless respect is shown to us, but more importantly, respect is shown to the chair that we occupy. Did I make sense?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So now students are here because they are expecting the results. They will appear for their interview, personality test rather, in 2021. What would they actually possess, or what should they expect, and how can they maximize their marks in this personality test? Because there are lots of rumors. This hobby should be there, this hobby should not be there, this hobby is good, this hobby is not good. Students keep wondering, attending 10, 15 mocks, roaming around institutes and institutes. So what should be the approach of this personality test?
See, one of the things I'd say is that, you can't learn a very large number of things in a short span of time. Right. So you cannot suddenly decide to become a soccer player like Zidane in 1 month or 2 months. It's just not possible, right? You can't become like Muhammad Ali, even if you try, if you have never done boxing before. So it is best to ask ourselves that very first question. What is it that you as an interviewer would be looking for? What are the qualities you're looking for? And I think what you need to work on are qualities. And one of the things that I've always been asked when I mentor persons like yourself or people looking for a job at the corporate sector is, how should I dress? And I've always said that you need to show respect to the person you're speaking to. And there are two ends of the spectrum, and I call them under and over. Okay? So let me try and explain. You can't afford to be underdressed. You can't go casually, wearing chappals and a pair of jeans and a t-shirt. So you can't go underdressed. You don't have to go overdressed, wearing a three-piece suit. You don't have to go overdressed because you're not there. You're not there as yet. Someday you will be there. Someday, yes, indeed, you will wear a three-piece suit and you will wear expensive clothes. But the interviewer recognizes that you're young, you have to probably borrow money in order to be able to buy that kind of thing. And you probably borrow from your parents or your friends. They don't expect that. Because what they're trying to get into the service is not image, but essence. don't forget this difference. There's a difference between image, what do I look like, and there's difference between what do I stand for. The two are very, very different. What can I bring onto the table? What adds value? And so I would say that, if there is a hobby, for example, that you don't have, by all means try and learn it, but you can't say that if you've never learned French, there's no point sitting down and saying that, I speak French, and start attending classes in French. Look at the talents that you already have and work on those. Sharpen them. Did I make sense to you?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay.
Thank you so very much, sir. Sir, there are issues related to not only dressing, but also if a student is unable to answer a few questions, that poses an extra added pressure on the student. And that affects the subsequent answering. Like if I couldn't answer first question, second question, that actually discourages my morale. So how to tackle such situations? Because I cannot answer all the questions.
No, I think that's a excellent question, and I have two views on that. All right, so let me share both the views with you, okay? And then through interaction, we can take a decision. Now, one of the views that I have, and I believe in it, is that if you don't know, you don't know. And I've said this very often, that nobody expects anyone to know everything about everything. But people do expect that you can't be completely ignorant about all things. Now, for example, if someone were to ask you a question, like, how many people voted for President Trump in the last elections? Now, that's a common knowledge. A certain amount of basic reading would tell you 74.8 million people voted for President Donald Trump. But he didn't win the elections. If someone asks you, why do you think the US elections, presidential elections of 2021, why 2020 was historic? Now, there are clear reasons to be able to explain why it was historic, and you may not know all the answers, but you should be able to respond to some of them. It's the first time, for example, that 160 million people, US electoral history, 160 million people voted for the presidential elections. The first time that a losing candidate received as many votes as Mr. Trump did. The first time that the presidential candidate, the president who won, Joe Biden, received that many votes. The first time that a woman was a vice presidential candidate. The first time that it's a woman of color was, so there are a whole series. You may not know all the 5, 6 points, but you might know at least 2 or 3. Which brings you to the second aspect, which is that many people in management science today, many companies want to find out that if I were to give you a problem, right, you know nothing about, what's your reaction? Now, many people may say, oh, I've never encountered this problem, I don't know what to do about it. Sorry. Many others may actually find a creative solution to that problem. So there is a different school of thought which says that, look, companies are also looking for creativity in the manner in which you look at a problem that you actually feel you know nothing about. It's a completely new challenge. Now, if in 2019 December, you were to go to an interview and the person were to say, if there is a pandemic and the world shuts down, how will you teach students? Now, you may say, I've never faced a situation like this. I have no idea. Now, that can be a response. Nobody expects you to know everything about everything. But if you were to say, I don't know, but quite possibly, this could be a platform for online education, then what you're doing is you're thinking outside the box. So I think it's important for us to not expose our ignorance. For example, if someone were to say, can you tell me the distance between the Earth and the Moon? and you don't know the distance between the Earth and the Moon, you can crack a joke and say, look, it's very far away, right? Now, I don't think anyone in the interview board is going to be impressed. Or you can say that, look, it's so many thousands of miles away. Or you can say, I'm sorry, sir, or I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't know the exact answer. But when I get back home, I'll find out. If someone were to say that what happens if there is an earthquake, tremor, and this building starts cracking, what do you think we should be doing? Well, then you have to think outside the box. You can't say, I have no idea, you know? And that's when you challenge yourself. So I think it cuts both ways. I think it's important for every candidate to recognize that the whole objective of an enterprise is to be able to find out the person I'm hiring, will that person think outside the box? Will that person design solutions? Will that person add value? Yeah, that's your tipping point. That's your tipping point. Because all of you who are sitting in this room, let's just assume all of you are engineers. Okay? Let me just assume that all of you are chemical engineers. All of you have got first class, right? So what's your tipping point? We're all equal. What makes you stand out? What makes you stand out, right? So the question is, why me? Why should you be selected? And that is a critical question. It goes back to the 4 questions I asked you to think about. You know, what is the quality that the employer is looking for, and do you have it? And if you don't, of course, you're going to do something about it. Do you have it? Why me is simply that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. So there is one question from your surveys. Like there are lots of students, they opt for Indian Foreign Service. And even if they don't opt, there are so many questions related to foreign policy, because these days foreign policy or India's, because of this globalized world, it has gained traction. So there are 2 situations, like COVID, post-COVID scenario when lockdowns are being lifted, and also post-Trump Biden era. So if there is a question related to this aspect, post-COVID, India's foreign policy challenges, and post-Trump, India's foreign policy challenges, what should be the approach of a student?
So, I mean, you know, the first thing I'd say is that these can't be responses that you can off the cuff make up. You have to be informed, which means, you know, you should read the newspapers, you should listen to the news. And when I say listen to the news, listen to international news. You know, go to CNN International, go to BBC International. There are excellent debates there. You can go to the internet. There's some fantastic podcasts and discussions over there. Now, if you just ask yourself, post-COVID, so COVID is still lingering, right? But many people are feeling a little better than they were feeling last year, because vaccines have now started coming into the picture, right? But of course, there are new strains, the mutations are taking place, etc. So the world is not going to open up completely in 2021. But we are already trying to look at a post-COVID world, you know, from complete restriction and zero movement, so to speak, lockdown, to partial opening, to greater opening, etc. So what are the implications? The first major implication is that during the period of 2020, when the pandemic was in its full form, economies got hurt, right? So it's an economic slowdown, recession. So the post-COVID world is naturally going to be a world in which all countries would want to once again reach a level of economic stability. Now, what does this really mean in real terms? You know, so for people like you and me What does that mean? It means that people lost jobs, right? I mean, there's so many people we know who were told that, I'm sorry, I can't afford to have you. You know, that's a nice way of putting it. Many people just got a piece of paper which said, as of tomorrow morning, you don't need to come to work. Finish, you're terminated, your job is terminated. Now, unemployment went up. Now, unemployment in white-collar jobs is one way of looking at it, but unemployment leading to extremes of poverty in the informal sector is another way of looking at it, you know. So basically, when you say economic stability and economic recovery, you're talking about lifting all people, right? Now, how do you do that? Well, that is the big post-COVID challenge. But the world does not stand still. You know, we've just read in today morning's newspaper. Last night, my wife and I were watching it on the news. President Joe Biden has ordered, and as you know, January 20th, he was inaugurated. President Joe Biden ordered his first missile strike, which took place in Syria. Now, when I say the world is not standing still, what I'm saying is the world is not just focused on COVID and post-COVID economic recovery. Many things are happening around the globe to which people are going to react. No, for example, it was at the height of the pandemic that we had Chinese incursions into India, which is in June of last year, right? So the world keeps moving, things keep happening. You know, India and Pakistan have just had a conversation to be able to say, no, we will have a ceasefire and no cross-border firings will take place. It's got nothing to do with COVID, right? So what is the world going to look like with Joe Biden as the president? And I think it's going to be a complex world. He's going to be very different from the former president with whom we enjoyed a personal rapport and chemistry. But I also think that in the case of President Joe Biden, we're going to move towards a very strong, sustainable relationship. But there will be complications. In India, for example, we have a visceral reaction when people criticize us, you know, but this is going to happen. In democracies, particularly the kind of democracy that Democrats believe in, is that if there's a civil rights problem, if there's a human rights problem, they're going to talk about it. When President Obama came to India on a state visit, at the invitation of Prime Minister Modi, he came and lectured us on communalism. This is part of their DNA. The question is, the post-COVID, that's because it's a milestone. But going forward, Indian diplomacy has to accept that many in diplomacy, undiplomatic things will be said, what we will consider to be undiplomatic. Question is, how do you adjust to it? How do you adjust to it? How do you put your point of view across and listen to their point of view? Because at the end of the day, you have to realize, do you want certain friends or do you want to alienate them?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, Prabhakar, sir, I would like to have your viewpoint on some psychological aspect of this interview. The first thing is, what do you think is the psychology of personality test for the board and for the student?
That's very important, and I think this is a very perplexing aspect for many students, because everybody keeps talking about it's a personality test, but we seldom pay much attention to what is personality. So personality is not the baritone voice that I talk like Richard Burton or I wear nice clothes. The one thing that you need to feel, and that is very important, that everybody, every person coming from a rural background or urban background or coming from tall people or not very tall, stout, petite, everyone fits in that, speaking whatever language. That's very, very important. And second thing is that personality is relatively, that does not change with the passage of time. that almost stays at every aspect of your life that you are doing, but we do play roles. Sometimes, actually, we are trying to say something, do something in different circumstances. But personality, something that stays permanently what you are. It's something like that in the mid-20s. By mid-20s, it's almost like the plaster of Paris that you handle, and after a few minutes it starts getting harder and you cannot reshape it anymore. So by mid-20s it starts getting harder, but there are the few things that could be done. It's something like that. You must have heard, if you are, many of, Honorable Sir was talking about that many of you could be engineering graduates. So you must have heard about chaos theory. In a large complex system, if a small change is brought at the right time, at the right place, in the right amount, so that can make a tremendous amount of difference. For example, if we could just give up using certain cliches, if we could just learn that how to sit properly, how to maintain proper eye contact, if we could just understand that what language do we need to use, that is very formal as well. If we could intonate our voice where you could convey the emotions that we want to convey. And if we could try to read the person who is asking me the questions. For example, suppose if the board is asking questions that Prime Minister Imran Khan recently visited Sri Lanka, and how do you think that his visit is very important from the perspective of India? And then you start talking about what he was trying to do from the perspective of Pakistan. But what is important is that you have to talk about from the perspective of India, and that you have to understand. He was talking about, he was pushing SHIPEC, he was eulogizing how the China has uplifted the Pakistanis out of poverty. So actually he was working as a public relation officer for China, and you will understand that the nuances of those things. For example, in Delhi High Court, the issue that is there about the same-sex marriage, and the government of India has filed an affidavit. So you must have read what the government of India has filed the affidavit. But before the board, if you are confident, you could argue that, like the Special Marriage Act, there could be a special statutory provision, and it is a minuscule minority, and probably they could be given such rights. So confidence, boldness, where does it come from? Clarity, where clarity comes from. If you look at the issues, reading these from the newspapers or whatever sources you are using, and if you try to understand that the person who is giving the information, the newspaper, the television, or whatever source you are using, they could have certain ideological biases. But if you could find out that what is objective and what is rooted in reality, then it will be much easier for you to answer and the confusions will be gone. So focus on those things that could be changed. Personalities cannot be changed, and that is why in the civil services I said that everybody fits in. But focus on those things, the easier things. The dress, your voice, non-verbal communication, eye contact, and the humility that you show, appreciation that you show for the question. And if you are ignorant, with a great deal of humility, if you could say that, I'm sorry, sir, I'm afraid I have not read that part of the syllabus. I have not read that part of the book. I'm afraid I never had the opportunity to work in that area. There are so many ways of saying no's, and that is how you can make a lot of difference. So I started with like the chaos theory when I was talking about, as you know, that an American meteorologist talked very nicely about it. The flutter of the butterfly wings in the South China Sea can change the weather in the North Carolina. How possibly it could be there? One small things could lead to another. So from today onwards, it's very important that please focus only on those things which are, using a cliche, doable. What are the doables? It could be different things for the different people. If you can ask questions, you can pose questions and ask somebody and you can get answers, but start working on those areas. For example, I will ensure that you never sit like that gentleman, the cross hands. It has got the certain meanings attached to that. So my sitting posture, my eye contact, the way I talk, my voice, my language, my dress, everything, I'm communicating a lot and many things could be changed. So even if the personality cast, it's difficult to make any changes. After the mid-20s, it's very, very difficult. But still a lot of difference could be made. So you must take personality into consideration, that everybody has a personality, every person has a good personality, but a few things here or there, if you can change that, we can certainly perform very well. And take the monkey out of your back that I have to do a lot of things. No, you just have to be aware, sincere, and find out a to-do list for yourselves. Make the list simple and start working on it. Just in a few weeks, you will make a lot of difference.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, the point here is, like, we should work on doables. We should work on voice. We should work on body language, etc., etc. But if objectively, I have to ask, what are the exact 5, 7, 10, 2, 3 points that a student should work? Like now, students are preparing for their personality test. They are expecting their mains result. It can come out anytime soon. So, this 1.5 months, how should they utilize that? If I have to list few points.
Exactly. That's a very good question, because I myself said that we have to focus on the doables. So that will take the stress out of the thinking that what humongous things that I might need to do. Simple things. The first thing, for such a long time in the classrooms or in their cafe or the canteens or talking to friends anywhere, that you might have seen that people are striking different sitting postures. If you go to a meeting where 500 people are sitting, you will notice 500 people are sitting in 500 different ways. But every day, twice or thrice, you take a very simple, ordinary dining chair. Even if you don't have got, you can just take a very, very simple, ordinary stool, put it against a wall, and try to sit on it, sitting erect, slightly leaning forward, not making hand movements, and answering imaginary questions. Ensuring that you don't touch your face, because in a talk I was talking about the US presidential debates and how their body language. You will another thing which I have not talked about. You will notice that even if those presidential candidates are speaking for 2, 3, 4 hours, 6 hours, not even for a split second take their hands to their faces. Why? Because there are certain meanings attached to that. There could be some physical reason as well. I get stressed. When I get stressed, then I think my nervous system, it just goes in the opposite direction. And then if you inhale and exhale on your hands, you will notice that your exhalation is getting warmer, and that leads to the drying of your throat and the nasal canals. And then suddenly you feel a bit of itching, and it automatically, that is the part of the evolutionary biology, your hands goes to that. But unfortunately, the person sitting across interviewing you, that person has read a book on body language, and that will associate with a few negative things. So that is why ensure that you inculcate the certain habits, sitting postures, voice as well. Try to keep asking somebody that, do I use certain cliches, certain colloquial expressions which is not used generally in a formal situations, and try to get rid of that. The voice, ensure that your energy level is good. So even for a half an hour, the interview goes 30, 40 minutes, ensure the energy level. How do you do that? Don't go on empty stomach, and also don't go eating with a half-a dozen muli ka parathas. So that is also very, very important, because that will make you sluggish. Ensure that you are properly hydrated. So language, voice, and one very important, the last thing. If you are talking about, for example, the crime against women, or the farmers committing suicide, the empathy, the gravitas in your voice should be there when you are talking about that. But when you are talking about that how your favorite player has performed in the cricket, then the laughter, the enthusiasm, the cheerfulness in your voice will be there. But the same emotion should not be there. It's a roller coaster of emotion during the interviews. You are not like the Dr. Spock of the Star Wars, who did not have any emotions. So try to display emotion, but in the right amount at the right place. A lot of things, everything that I'm talking about, it's doable. Voice is doable. Language is doable. Your sitting posture is doable. Eye contact is doable. Exaggerated hand movements, if you do it, you look professorial. So that is doable. Learn to keep your hands on your laps like this and to talk. So these are the things that you can do, and it will make a tremendous difference. I said, again, I'm repeating the chaos theory when I was talking about. A few small changes will bring tremendous change in the huge system that is your personality, and the goal that he was going to do that. Finance minister does that before he presents the budget, or if we plan that how we are going to take on China. in Ladakh region, we also do that thing, the chaos theory. Some of you must be knowing what is it and how do we do that. I could go on talking about it, but focus on the small things, doable things. I could tell you a few further things as well if you ask questions. That could be your personal problems as well. But the small things will make a big difference.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador, sir, once you were telling me that diplomacy is a language. And related to the same question, in diplomacy also, language, body language and non-verbal communications, they play a very big role. And being such a legend of diplomacy, what would be your take, sir? How students should approach this body language and is a non-verbal communication part?
Look, I think it was wonderfully put by you, sir. And one of the most critical things I'd say is that, all of you, your starting point needs to be that you guys y'all are good. And it's only because you're good that you're here. So that's the very first point I would like you to not just know, but believe in it. And when you have that, what comes in is a certain level of confidence. And then go back to my statement of under and over, right? You don't want to be underconfident about yourself. You don't want to be overconfident about yourself. You want to be able to strike a balance, which is where the other issues come in. Body language, etc. Which means, what are you doing? You're actually trying to hone in certain skills or certain elements about yourself that you would not normally think about, right? You wouldn't normally think about, how am I sitting? Many might normally sit and think and say, how am I dressed? If you're taking a girl out to dinner, you will find the best clothes to wear. If you're going out for a cup of chai to the dhaba with your friend, you still will be bothered about, am I wearing the right jeans? I'll wear jeans and t-shirt. I won't overdress. I won't suddenly go and wear a tie and go and sit in the dhaba, right? So people are constantly thinking. But what you need to do when you say, let's say, diplomacy is a language, communication is a language. And so when you sit, you are still communicating even if you don't say a single word. Please recognize that the power of non-verbal communication is as critical as verbal communication. Therefore body language becomes very important. I'll give you an extraordinary example which will probably explain to you in a second as to why is it that people say the Chinese, the government, not the Chinese people. I have lots of friends who are Chinese, and I wouldn't say it about them. Why is it that they talk about the Chinese government as being aggressive, as being hegemonic, as giving the impression that they have power, Why? And this is an example that I always think about. When Xi Jinping's counterpart, whoever that person is, let's say it's President Joe Biden, or let's say it's the president of Somalia, when they visit Beijing and they need to go and see him, they have to walk down a very long corridor to meet Xi Jinping, who is waiting there for them to come. It's like walking up to the king, and then Xi Jinping will shake hands. Think about what we do in India. We go to the steps of the aircraft to meet the head of state or government. Receive him or her right there. This is body language. It's the manner in which you communicate. He hasn't said a word. He's just standing at the end of a red carpet corridor, and you are walking all that distance because you're coming to the king, right? This humiliates you. This brings you down. This tells you who is the most important person in that room. When you're actually communicating and talking to people, many things matter in terms of the manner in which you speak. You know, sir was very kind and he gave this example of Richard Burton, you know, who is a very well-known Shakespeare actor. But a good example along with him would be Amitabh Bachchan, you know, when he speaks, his voice, that baritone voice, and you listen. But what happens is when you look at the screen, there's presence. There's presence. Because in one shot, that screen is captured by that one person who comes in. So when you walk into the room and you're meeting a number of people, you're not saying anything. Maybe you're just saying, good morning, sir, good morning, ma'am, namaste, whatever it is. But that's all before you sit down. And in that striking set of seconds, you capture attention. And you can capture attention negatively as also positively. I mean, none of you will do it. But if you walked in wearing shorts, believe me, you will capture attention. But that's not what you want, right? Nor do you want to go wearing in a silk sari that you would wear for a wedding. You don't want to do that. You want to go there dressed, and there's a very, very powerful word that is used when we get invitations in the Foreign Service. We get these invitations which says your dress code. And one of those is called smart casual. I would recommend smart casual. Smart casual simply means you don't wear a tie, you don't need to wear a jacket, you can wear proper trousers, good shirt, not a bush shirt, full sleeve shirt for men, shoes, I would recommend with shoelaces, because shoelace shoes are known as the classic, the Oxford shoe, the traditional, the conservative shoes. By all means, wear shoes without shoelaces. But what I'm saying is polish your shoes, right? So when you walk in, what they see is a person who's going to be down to earth, a person who's refreshingly looking forward to the job and happy to engage. That's what you need to communicate. Not, I know everything. I don't need to learn anything more. I know everything, you know, and my father pays for it. No, nobody wants that. Or, I couldn't care less, you know, I've come here in my jeans and my shorts and my jeans are torn. I believe, you know, torn jeans today are the height of fashion. I mean, I met someone the other day with torn jeans and I said, look, if you have a money problem, tell me, I'll buy you a pair of jeans. He says, no, this is very expensive. So I didn't realize that. What I'm trying to say is there are many meetings I've had in the Foreign Service where all of us were wearing jeans. All of us. But there's a time and a place. I would never wear it for an interview. Yeah? Did that make sense? Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
So now let's start Q&A. Right. So now you can ask questions. You can address the dignitary whom you are referring to or you are asking questions from. And you please start. If you have any question, any query related to your personality test or otherwise, please introduce yourself and then ask.
Good evening, sir. Vignesh, the non-verbal communication that you're talking about. So one significant point that you stressed on is placing the hands on the lap and practicing that. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to just give a background. I'd given a few mock interviews and then an UPSC interview for the Forest Services last year. Mm-hmm. And I tried the same thing. But based on my self-awareness, I had developed my verbal communication with the aid of my non-verbal cues. Verbal communication was not so naturally comfortable for me. So non-verbal cues were there. So when I tried to place my hands on the lap, I was consciously trying to do that in the interview, and that affected my the way I put forth my points over there. Subsequently, 2 other interviews that I attended over the past three or 4 months, I did not consciously think about placing my hands on the lap. I just went about communicating my point, and I had my hand movements out that the way I'm doing it now. So that and the outcome of the interviews came out to be really positive. So is that really significant to practice that?
The first thing is that it's a matter of practice. I said that if in the formal situations, if you could practice a bit, like speaking to a friend sitting, making him sit across the chair 8 feet away, and if you could practice that. Why hand movements are usually avoided? Because in informal situations or where there is a kind of the equal communications, then hand movements are okay. But here there is a sense of hierarchy, and you are being interviewed for a job. So your hand movements starts looking professorial, as if that you are explaining or teaching things. The situation is not like that. You look more matured, but at the same time, you are giving respect to the board by not using your hand movements because they are distracting as well. So it is considered that it's a good method of communicating. But if suppose by mistake or unconsciously suddenly you use your hand, if you say, "I'm sorry, sir," and if you take it down, that will be even highly appreciated because it's human to err. So even if your hands went up and you used it, apologize, "Sorry, sir," and bring it down. Well, some of you who actually really want to keep your hands on your laps and still finding it difficult, then another way of doing that, you can lock your hands. So some students have told me that sometimes we just forget that I have to keep my hands on my lap and suddenly I start using my hands. So if you want to remind yourself, let your fingers touch against each other. The feel of this finger against another finger will keep reminding you that I'm supposed to keep my hands together. But the moment you lock your hands, the curvature, the shoulders are not exactly square. So that is why keeping hands apart is better. But if you find that you will start doing that, then you can lock your hands like that. I can understand because that is the part of the habit. You have always talked with your hand movements. But as I can say that a few habits could be unlearned as well. But if you cannot do that, and if you somehow you bring your hands up and use it, then you can simply apologize. Once or twice it's okay and you can bring it down. Because those people who are conscious of their mistakes, they are very much appreciated as well. If the board thinks that you understand that it was something you should not have done, they will appreciate it. So don't worry about that. But you can practice. Still, I think it's more than a fortnight away, the interviews. So a bit of practice and it will help you.
My name is Akash Kumar. So I have two questions. First is you talked about non-verbal communications. Mm-hmm. In general, we all have that because of our upbringing. But while we are talking to someone, there is a kind of pressure. So that pressure will go only after, I think, practice, like talking to more people. And for that, we will have to take more number of mocks. But I feel that there is a kind of stigma associated with taking more number of mocks. Like whenever I talk to people, so people will tell me that you should go for three or four mocks.
Can I interrupt? No stigma is attached with getting more the mocks. The only reason that we suggest that don't take so many mocks because you will get so many the feedbacks and some of them could be contradictory. So that will confuse you. That is the one reason why we say that. But if you feel comfortable and if you're not satisfied with the 1 mark, maybe you can try one more. But no stigma is attached. Who said that there is stigma attached? It's only that the too many mocks could make you feel a little confused, the feedbacks that you get.
So there is one more question, also again related to psychology. Like one of my hobbies is watching videos related to, YouTube videos related to shadow integration. Shadow integration, Kalia.
Shadow integration, okay.
Yes, sir. So,
What is shadow integration?
He will explain it.
So shadow integration, shadow is that part of the personality which either have been repressed or it has not been realized. Kalian gives different archetypes.
Since we don't have long time, so let me cut it short make it simple for the other candidates as well. The first thing is that the entire the domain of the psychodynamics that he's talking about it's not in the realm of the objective psychology. So the hardcore psychologist would not feel very comfortable with that. But still, it has got a great deal of respectability. We focus on the behavior and the cognitive part of that. The behavioral changes we talk about, and we talk about the cognitive part. For example, the feeling of anxiety, the feeling of the lack of confidence, and if your voice starts to stammer because the stress that you feel. And so there are the certain the mechanisms, that intervention mechanisms that will help you. What he is talking about, that is in the realm of a lot of debate, and whether it is effective or not. So I'm afraid we can have a chat after this program is over. But we are talking about the small, doable steps that help you improve your communication skill and non-verbal skills. As you know that non-verbal communication is very, very important, because the words that you are saying is less important. And what your body is saying. For example, the board might, even if you say that I won't take dowry, the board will, suppose they ask you, but your body language will be saying something else. They are looking at the cues, which possibly could tell them that probably you are bluffing the board. So we have to be very, very careful of those aspects alone. So what is your, the issues or something that bothers you that we can talk about if we could solve it? Because 10 or 15 days that time we have got, let's focus on those things which could be changed. Practical things, let's be practical.
That is hobby of mine, that is not a problem. The issue is that how much should I know about human psychology, like what the board will expect?
Psychology, if you think that you know about psychology, if I could ask you that which is the most authoritative document that the psychologists refer to? That you don't know. Why enter into that realm if you have not much studied about that? Because psychology is a very, very dynamic science. And if I ask you that, how would you define psychology? Then what would you say? Suppose the board asks you that, what is psychology?
So I didn't enter into it because of...
Then why do you want to adopt or pick up this hobby? But if you have already written it there, then I think that you will have to work on in that area.
I entered into this because initially I started with meditation. Then I did some days I...
So why not you start with learning what is psychology? Just simple question. So psychology is the science of cognitive and the behavioral science.
Thank you, sir. We discussed about questions which are objective in nature. And you said that if you do not know the answer, you can simply say you don't know instead of bluffing around. But then there are questions that are subjective in nature. Taking a cue from the current affairs that we are seeing nowadays, say the farmer protest. If I'm asked a question about that and I say that I'm against the protest and I get a counter question on it. So in case of a disagreement, do I need to change my answer or should I stick to what my opinion is?
Look, I'll be very frank with you. You are on much stronger ground when you speak about what you personally believe in. You are on totally weak ground if you speak about something you have no empathy with. You know, I think Sir made a very important point about passion and empathy. It's the way you talk about a situation. You know, you can replace the farmer agitation with anything, with the CAA bill, with the same-sex marriage, with Indo-Pakistan relations. You know, you can put anything you want over there. How do we treat people who are from the Northeast? Are Indians racially abusive? You know, any question can be put to you. Now, you must have, and I'm sure you have, a view. Should women be empowered? Should women be given an equal status? You will have a personal view. Now, I, as an interviewer, and you know, thank yourself that I'm not the interviewer. Because if I was, I would actually ask you, I would behave like what is known in English films as, or in management science, it's called the good cop, bad cop. Which means that I would badger you and make it difficult for you to push you to defend your argument, even if I believe in what you're saying. That's an interview technique, right? But I would always say, stick by what you believe in. You know, should women break the glass ceiling? You can have a view, which is that they should. You can have a view that there is no need to break the glass ceiling. You may have a view that you simply don't agree to same-sex marriage. Or that you don't see anything wrong in it. I have very close friends who are gay, live together. Some of the truly great writers in the world happen to be gay. Some of the truly great innovators in the world happen to be gay. You know, some people, their computers, many of us use, right? Now you may take a position and say, I agree with it, or I don't agree with it. Now if the questioning says, why do you agree with it? Or why don't you agree with it? You know, and it continues along those lines and becomes combative. Stick to your position. Don't say, okay, no, sir, I'll think about it and I'll change my mind. Maybe you're right. No, never take that. Never take that. Because then your opinion is not going to be a credible one, which means that you can change your mind. People don't like people who change their mind. People don't mind people who can justify why they've changed their view. But you need to justify it. Yeah? Did that make sense? Okay.
Good evening, sir. Sir, the same question. So some people, when we listen to different videos, they say that we should take a balanced argument rather than put forward in our argument. So how do we combine both these things?
No, you can. For example, if I were to ask you a question like, do you think the caste system is a good thing or a bad thing? Your response can be to say that, the caste system has the following merits, the caste system has the following demerits, and in my personal view, you may subscribe to one or the other. I personally believe that the caste system has more demerits than it has merits. That's my personal view. And I can discuss with you on my personal view, But I don't need to change my view no matter how persuasive your argument may be for you. So I think in certain cases, there are positions you can take which can be so-called balanced. But there is no question of your taking a balanced view, is rape justifiable? If I were to ask you a question that girl who was in that bus and had been brutalized, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? There aren't two views on that. There is only a single view. So there is no question of taking a balanced view on that. So I think depending on the question, you will take a position. Most certainly, if you take the farmers' agitation, there can be two views to it. The farmers have a view. The government has a view. And you can present the two views and say that, look, this is what I feel is my personal view. Right?
Yes, sir. So it is mostly advised.
What's your name?
My name is Aditya, sir.
What have you studied?
History honors, sir.
Where?
From Hindu College, Delhi University.
Okay. All right. Tell me.
So it is advised that whatever view is, it shouldn't be not very much against the government stand. So what should your view if means it should not be against the government or we can tilt a bit towards that side?
I think the basic position is that you should not be combative, aggressive, and offensive in the manner in which you present your view. I think you need to be balanced, you need to be polite, your view needs to be argued. And by arguing, I don't mean, arguing in an offensive manner, but it needs to, in a very careful manner, enunciate why you take that particular position. In the interview, please be very clear. What we are expected to do as civil servants is that we can have our own view. We are allowed, even with the Official Secrets Act and with all the different documents you will sign, once you join service, you are allowed to have your view. You are allowed to express your view. But once the boss says, thank you, this is what we do, then that view is the way you do it, right? But being able to see two sides of the coin is what people are asking you for. the coin doesn't have one side. It is in Zen Buddhism that you learn the art of clapping with one hand. But essentially, you should know both sides of the argument. And by all means say that I think that side A, in my view, is more persuasive. The interview board is not asking you to toe the government's line. It's asking you for clarity in the manner in which you respond. That's what it's asking for. Yeah? But then again, please remember, don't be aggressive. Again, very important, verbal and non-verbal communication. Please do not be aggressive. Please do not be offensive. And I'm certain you will not be abusive. So, don't get agitated. Supposing someone will ask you that, do you think rape is justifiable? You can speak in a very calm manner and say that it's not justifiable. There's no need for us to get emotionally hyper about these things. The fact is that there is a law against it, and our job as civil servants is to ensure that the law is followed and the guilty are punished. That's our job.
Anyone else? Do you have any question?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
So why do you want to join the civil service? What about you, sir? In the check shirt. Just introduce it, tell your name so that everyone knows.
My name is Prabhakar. I have done engineering, and now I'm looking forward to join. To crack this UPSC exam.
Why?
The reason, sir, behind this is after doing my engineering, I worked for a couple of years, and then I realized that this is not where I should stop or carry on my whole life.
Okay.
So I must, study more and make myself more responsible, and the nature of job, what a civil services gives to us is something which is very different from an engineering job or any such other job. So the sense of responsibility and the kind of broad horizon with which a person lives his life while being in this service actually motivated me to prepare for this exam. So that's the reason.
Thank you so much. The lady sitting beside you. Yes, ma'am. Why would you want to join the civil service? And tell us about yourself.
My name is Chanchal. I belong to a middle class family, and lots of issues are there. There are lots of things I face. That is why I go. I feel there are lots of things we have to face as a girl child. There's something I'm not agree. Lots of things I'm not able to convince many people around my societal issues and many more things. So I think this is the job I can go for and make a little changes. As Sir said, little change can change our whole society and something like that. So I feel that if I will go for it and achieve it, then I will help somebody else, and at least I can try to change something.
How nice. So what you're really saying is you're joining the civil service because you feel it'll empower you.
Yes, sir.
And through you'll be able to empower society and people around you.
Yes, sir.
That's wonderful. I'll leave it to you now. Otherwise, I'll keep chatting. I have this bad habit.
Thanks so much, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Santosh Kushwaha. I'm graduate from Mumbai University. So my question,
What did you study?
BSc Mathematics.
All right.
Sir, my question is that my background has been language studies in school and colleges has been in English, but what if I'm more comfortable speaking in Hindi? Like sometimes I speak in Hindi and sometimes I speak in English. That does it affect in interview?
No, your question is, does it impact the interview?
How much it matters?
No. You're talking specific to the interview, or you're talking specific to the job of a civil service?
No, interview.
Interview. So in the interview, my position would be that you can take two different kinds of responses. If a question is asked to you in English, you respond in English. If a question is asked to you in Hindi, you can respond in Hindi or in English. But the preferred response would be in Hindi. If it's asked to you in Hindi, the preferred response is in Hindi. However, interview boards also recognize that people come from all parts of India, many of whom their mother tongue may not be Hindi. My mother tongue is not Hindi, it's Bengali. Right? So there are people from Assam who may come, from Kerala, from different parts of India. So the normal process in an interview board, the chances of questions being asked in English is significantly higher.
Anyone else who has any question? Thank you, sir. Thank you, Ambassador, sir. Thank you, Prabhakar, sir, for this enlightening session. And thank you, students, actually, for turning up and attending this session. And hopefully it will boost your morale for your personality test 2021. Thank you. Thank you so very much.